Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The Alumni podcast where you get to hear the inspiring stories and transformation that DVC has had to offer its alumni. And now, on with the episode.
Yes, sir. Okay. All right. And welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And just to switch it up, my friend Mario here decided he was going to sit on the other side. So we're just going to try this and see what happens. So in the comments, let us know. So let's start with having you introduce yourself.
Hola, my name is Mario Tejada Jr., and I am a DVC alumni and employee.
Yeah.
Well, retired.
Oh, that's right. You're retired and now you're working again.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll get to that point. Let's see. You're kind of a local yokel, aren't you? So
Yes,
where'd
sir.
you grow up around here?
So I grew up in UC, next to UC Berkeley, in Berkeley town, right? And my parents owned a restaurant in Berkeley, about 3 blocks from Cal, and that was my formative years, as they say. I grew up and went to school out there. Once I graduated high school, I made a decision as to I wanted to continue in the culinary path. You know, my parents' restaurant was open for 52 years.
Wow.
And you know, they were there, right by Cal, right diagonally across the street from People's Park on Telegraph and Hayes. So I've always enjoyed the restaurant. Out of the 3 kids, an older sister, younger sister, I was the only one that was like really interested in the culinary program. And at that point in time, back in 1979, there were 2 big culinary programs in the Bay Area. One was based in San Francisco, and one was based out here at Diablo Valley College. And living in Berkeley, I decided I did not want to go in the commute direction to San Francisco. So at that point in time, DVC's culinary program was ranked number 2 in the state. And so I decided to come here instead. And from 79 to 81 or so, I was here in the culinary program going through all the classes, you know, from safety to food prep to waiting on tables to front of the house and back of the house. And after that, I left and went out into the culinary world and did my thing.
So did you work at your mom and dad's place, or you worked other places? Or?
Well, mom and dad's place has always been a home base for a lot of things. So, you know, I started working at their place full time when I was 14. At 14, I went to my dad and I told him, hey, I'd really like to work full time during the summers and on weekends. I want to save money up for a car when I turn 16. And I said, and that way, Dad, you don't have to buy me a car. And my dad looked at me and said, I was never going to buy you a car. So this is a good plan. And so I started, you know, I had aspirations of being the maitre d' or the head chef or something, but I started off washing dishes. I did such a good job at washing dishes that first year that in the second year I got promoted to pots.
Wow.
I was a go-getter.
Okay.
And then again, I came to the culinary school here, and you know I've been working in restaurants ever since then. Once I got here, I did work back at our family restaurant. We had opened a new place in Montclair called Villa del Mar, which was a Mexican seafood house. So I worked there until the early 80s, the early 80s. And then I had an opportunity to work a couple other locations within Contra Costa County. At that point in time, I was living over here, mostly because I'd moved here for college and found some places out here, found a dinner house out in Antioch that I started off as the front of the house manager, ended up being the front of the house, back of the house manager. Then from back of the house and front of the house, I ended up being the bar manager. And then I just became, by that point in time, I'm wearing 3 hats. And the owner, she said, you know, I'm just going to make you the general manager. And so that's what I was doing. I was running a bar, a nightclub, a banquet room. And so I did a good stint there. About that time, I was married to my first wife. We had 3 kids. I had met my wife actually in the culinary program. And if any of you guys have worked in the service industry, you know, restaurant life is rough. If you want to make money, you are working nights and weekends. You are working Sunday brunch. You are, you know, you have no social life. And the girls were getting older. and I wanted to participate in their basketball or volleyball or softball, but I was gone. And after much discussion with my ex-wife, it was decided that, maybe I needed to start looking at a career change. Again, luckily for me, I had my parents, the restaurant. I went and had a long conversation with my dad. And he said, well, why don't you just come here, go back to school, figure out what you want to do. When you're here at the restaurant, you're my son. And so if you're taking a class on Wednesday night and then next semester you need to take a class on Thursday night, it's easier for you to approach one of the staff here and say, hey, for the next, 18 weeks, can we switch? Because I got to take a class, and then you'll get your shift back. And again, they knew who I was and they knew what I was trying to do. So that was an enormous help. That flexibility, that family support, that indirect family support, being able to go back to the restaurant and do things like that. Came back to Los Medanos College and DVC and took a lot of computer classes because I've always enjoyed computers. And that's where I ended up kind of staking my second claim. For those of you who are not quite sure about your career path, don't settle on one. Have multiple. Start off in the restaurant business. End up going to computers. It does not really matter. Switching it up is one of the great things about life.
Well, and that's one of the things I hear constantly with we've got 85. I looked the other day. I was like, we got 85 of these in the can now. And
wow.
Released. And
I remember when you started.
Yeah, I know. Back in the olden days. But the thing is like, the thing I hear constantly is like, a lot of people almost never show up with, this is what I want to do. Yeah. Or if they do, they go, they find something even more interesting. They're like, oh my gosh, this would be really cool over here. And, here's a great example. It's like, I'm going to be in culinary forever. And then you find out the hours suck. Mm-hmm. And they do.
Yeah.
And I've got, it's 2 of my 3 kids have worked in restaurants, and it's brutal. But so you got into computers back in the olden days when wheels were square, and I remember those days too because I got into computers at that point.
Here's a great story. My wife and I were traveling recently, and we happened to go into a museum, and they had you know where this is going.
Yep.
We walked around the corner to this display of stuff, and sitting there in the display case was a computer that I used after I got out of going through classes here at DVC. And I actually worked at Los Medanos College as an IT support person for a while. And I made a connection with a gentleman who had a software company. And we wrote software for the mortgage industry for people applying for applications. And so this was way back in the late 80s, early 90s that I worked for that software company. I worked with them for over 6 years. But, I started off replacing hard drives and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And I swear to God, I walked around that corner of that museum, looked at the case, and I'm like, darn, that's the computer that was sitting on my desk when I first got hired by that software company. Yeah. And I'm like, I told my wife, Jennifer, I said, come take a look at this. And it was an old
XT, huh?
Yeah. Yep. It's, people now talk about 1 terabytes of RAM and this, that, and the other thing. I remember how excited we got when we went up to 1 meg of RAM.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, we have an entire meg, 1 megabyte of RAM. And so that computer is in the case.
Yeah. So I got into computers back in the early 90s. And got a 386, and it was state of the art. And I got a VGA monitor, so I had color. Mm-hmm. And then I got a 40 meg hard drive. Figured I would never go to, And now we look at our phones, and it's like we get sad because there's only 256 gigs on it.
Correct. Gigs, not megs.
Yes.
Gigs.
Yeah. But.
Yeah, so that's the next step of my life and my career ended up being at that software company. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I think they hired me was I did have hardware background. I mean, I could replace drives and motherboards and all that sort of stuff. So that allowed me to be their in-house tech support. I built new machines for them. I configured, since we were selling software, one of the things that we had to do was put our software on floppies. And so we used to have a service that we would outsource it to, but they were charging more and more. And my boss one day said, "Do you think you can build this duplication machine?" I said, "Well, give me the specs, help me find that information. I could probably do it." And we did. Between he and myself, he was pretty technical also. We built that, and next thing you know, I'm the guy in charge of making duplicates. And hey, it was a great journey because I would spend half of the year writing code, meeting because it's mortgage. You have to meet the legal standards that we're rolling out every January with the new year. And so we would write code starting February. We'd be writing code like crazy. Then in October, November, we'd be doing a lot of beta testing. End of November, beginning of December, we'd roll out the software to our clients, first to a small group that were like our second level testers. And we had good reputations with them. We'd install the software, the test that they give us feedback. We'd do some final tweaks. And then January through half of February, I'd be like, "Hello, you've reached the Lone Star Systems Tech Support. My name is Mario. How may I be of assistance?" And I was wearing my little headphone and I was sitting there eating my Doritos and my can of Coke or a big cup of coffee. And that's what I did for 6 or 8 weeks. And what I loved about that job was the variety. I got to do hardware, I got to do software, I got to do phone support. And, in 6 years plus, we were getting ready to go to the next phase.
So there was a point where, okay, so you went through that, and I'm familiar with some of your stories. I kind of. So you went through 6 years of that. I know the mortgage industry had a meltdown, which I remember getting out of mortgages when, gosh, that was in the 90s.
Yeah,
it was, and I remember it just at a time it started making less and less sense, and
correct.
So I was just like, okay, I need to do something else. But so you went from that. So what was like the next phase?
Well, I think my boss saw the handwriting on the wall that you're talking about. So it was early 90s, 94-ish, 95, 94. And we came back from Christmas break. I had been tasked over the winter holidays to do research on how to convert our system from an old disk operating, an old DOS system to the newfangled Windows interface. And so I did my research and got prepared to do all that. We came back in January. We had the January bonus meeting where they hand out bonus checks. And they handed out the bonus checks and they said, "Well, you're going to notice that it's really big because it includes your severance," which they also at that point in time told us that our company had been bought by a bigger company based out of Seattle. And so that company came in about a week later, introduced themselves, said that they were going to interview us. And for some of us, they offered us jobs, but it meant relocating to the Pacific Northwest. And I grew up in Berkeley. I'm a California kid. No, I'm not going up north where
where it
rains all the time and it's kind of doom and gloomy, Don't like that. So we said no. I said no. And what happened at that point was my boss, who was one of 3 owners, but he was in charge of all the coding, he's out of a job too. Now, his severance check's a lot bigger than mine, but he's out of a job too, and he is looking to do something. And so he and I started talking, and he started putting his resume out, and he asked me for my resume. And so we ended up creating a little consulting company with he and I together. And so that's what we did. He was tasked. He got hired by USAID through another nonprofit called IFAS, International Foundation for Electoral Systems, whose mandate was to help developing countries move from either democracies or autocracies to democracies. And so, you're moving from dictatorships, or transitioning to quote unquote a democracy where they've had the same president for 12, 14 years. And now, so that's a dictatorship and everything except in the name. And so he ended up saying yes to an assignment. We were traveling to Disneyland, as a matter of fact. And I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing for the next month?" And I'm like, "The next month? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. I need you. Would you be willing to come down?" And I told him what I was doing, and he says, "If you can't, you can't." And I said, "Well, I don't have a job right now, and if this thing pays well, I can, I can extend my severance." So after discussions with my then wife, we decided to postpone Disneyland because that's not going anywhere. And I ended up flying in 1 week. I went and got a passport. I got shots. I had shots in both arms and in 2 other locations further south. I had I had to go to San Francisco to go get a passport and just all the lots of hoops.
This is pre 9/11.
It's pre 9/11.
Yeah,
So
you can do all this stuff in a week.
You can do all this stuff in a week, and Kaiser. I remember the nurse at Kaiser Injection Clinic goes, "You're back again." I'm like, "Yeah, with this, I was the only one that's left. Everything else is sore." And we went. I ended up flying into Johannesburg. I worked for 3.5 weeks. We worked for the Electoral Commission of South Africa during the Mandela election.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we were there for that election. It's that time where South Africa was transitioning from apartheid to the first free and fair multi-ethnicity election. And it was so cool to be part of that. Yes, there were sandbags. Yes, there were people walking around with machine guns. Yes, we had security. One of my jobs, I was sitting across the table, just like you and I are, sharing a desk with a gentleman from England who was our security specialist. And so he approached me and he said, I hear you know how to do desktop publishing. I said, "Yes, sir." "Can you make me badges?" And I said, "Yes, sir." "How many badges do you need?" He goes, "I'm going to need 36 badges. I said, "Okay. What do you want the badges to say?" His name was Niles. And he goes, "How about we call it M&N Beverage Company?" I'm looking at him. I go, "Okay, I can do that." And then he goes, "I want you to put this specific icon on it, and underneath say access to 7th floor." Okay. And so I put all that stuff on. I created the 36 badges, and I finally said, "So what's this for?" And he goes, "Well, in case the building gets attacked," because we were in the 7th floor building, the Electoral Commission building. The 7 floors, we were on the 6th floor. The 7th floor was the cafeteria. And so if the building got attacked, there were military down on the ground floor to hold people off. And he would hand out these badges to 36 people. And you put the badge on, go to the 7th floor, and then jump up onto the helicopter pad. This building was selected because it had a helicopter pad on the top. And they would then fly in helicopters to pick up the people that had this, M&N Beverage Company badge only. So I don't know about you, but my next question was, is my name on that list of 36, or am I making the 37th badge? And he goes, "Your name's on the list." And so welcome to elections.
That's most people's first job out of the country is not that brutal.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It was cool. I worked with a lot of great people in South Africa. They were phenomenal. We ended up designing a system where armored personnel carriers were going into the back countries, because you got to remember, only maybe a third of the country actually had paved roads. Mm-hmm. 2/3, mostly up in the north and the Transvaal and where all the big game parks are and reserves are. There are villages out there, and they might be as close as Walnut Creek and Martinez, but it's a dirt road. And so what they figured out was they could put all the supplies into the back of the armored personnel carrier, all the voting material, the pamphlets, the ballots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, have a squad of military personnel to protect it. And then they would drive that armored personnel carrier. It would start off Wednesday, one morning in Walnut Creek, but there'd only be maybe 100 people in the village, sometimes only 50. sometimes 20, sometimes 150, but never a huge amount. So those folks who was their first time to be able to vote, they were up the night before queuing up to go be able to vote. And so they'd be camped out in front of the armored personnel carrier. They pull all the stuff out. Voting would take about 2 hours. They load all the stuff back up, and then they drive hour and a half from Walnut Creek to say like Martinez. And so then they'd set up. So the voting booth would be there like at 11 o'clock. Same thing, run it for 2 hours. They pack up at around 1 or 2, and then they drive another hour and a half, 2 hours, say to like Concord, Clayton, the far side.
Yeah.
And it's all dirt roads. So it's like, and they do 3 stops in one day. One of my jobs was to actually calculate that schedule out. And the cool thing was the schedule that I developed was then printed on the national newspaper. And it had all the stuff, the addresses where people could go access voting booths. And again, majority of the paper is traditional, go down the 2nd Street. It's at the post office box there. That's where you can do voting. But when you got out to the villages, the directions to the locations got just a little bit more creative. For one of them, example, I still remember seeing this when I was going through my database. I'm like, the tent behind Bob's house in a specific village. And I'm like, wow, Bob must be a big mucky muck.
Well, and it probably made a lot of sense to them because, as well, and even now, I mean, tells you how archaic. I mean, we have a restaurant that used to be TJ's Cafe, and I can't tell you what it is now, but we really like it. So that's where Shelly and I go all the time. But it's like, I mean, that's the landmark, Yeah,
and I'm sure for the 50 people that lived in that village, they knew Bob. They knew where his house was, and they definitely could see the tent.
Yeah.
So that all had meaning to them. But I loved the fact that we were going that extra mile to make sure these people had a chance to do voting. And talk about having people excited about having that privilege.
I do try to keep that in mind when it comes time to vote, because it's like, I mean, we can mail in votes and we're apparently not motivated enough to do that. Oh. And it's kind of like, really, guys,
Yeah.
Well, and you have all these excuses, but you look at it in these countries like that, like the first time they get to vote ever, or like you go back to Poland when the Iron Curtain fell, and and things like that. And it's just like, you know what, you gotta learn to appreciate that gift that you have, so you had fun in South Africa. Interesting time.
Interesting time. I came back, the consulting company, we had a 1-year contract with the water district where I did some network design, did some installations, and that was a lot of fun. Got to meet lots of cool people. At the end of that year, Mike, my partner, ended up being assigned a 2-year stint in Ghana. And so he was going to be the technology lead in Ghana for their elections. But this time we were coming in onto the election process right at the beginning.
Oh.
And so he contacted me. And so I ended up doing a 3-month tour in Ghana, basically ordering and purchasing a lot of the hardware because they used mainframes there. They weren't used to personal computers, desktops. I took all that, trained their IT staff on how to do it, and we designed it, installed the network. So it was a very interesting 3 months. And then I got to come home, and he got to stay there for another 2+ years, and the elections went on without a hitch. The gentlemen and women that I trained in the IT staff, I heard later on, were just phenomenal. Which makes you feel good.
Yeah.
As a teacher and a mentor, and I fellow IT nerd, to hear that your IT crew, did well. It's like having your Dungeons and Dragons team beat everybody else, right?
Yeah.
But we won't get into Dungeons and Dragons this podcast. And then after that, I came back, and then the thing that I never thought would happen, and none of the men and women who had been my instructors, teachers in grade school or high school, or even probably some of the teachers I had in college here at DVC the first go round, I ended up in an education. And
So how did that happen?
Yeah. So I ended up coming back. Los Medina College needed somebody to do some network design in the computer lab back then. You got to remember, back then, not everything was networked. Everything was standalone. So they wanted to share printers, and they had a big lab where everybody was doing their work. So I designed and installed a network for them. Had an opportunity to become their lab manager for a year. So I did that. And while I was there managing the lab at Los Medanos College, my boss said, you should really apply part-time teaching. And I said, well, if you think I can do it, but I've never really done any teaching. And this is where, when a person is too close, you're too close to, you're too far in that forest to really see the trees, that entire kind of saying. I never thought of myself as a teacher. But Professor Jeff Freitas, who had been one of my instructors, and I consider a friend now, but was my mentor through this entire transitioning to teaching process. He said to me, well, when you worked at the software company, you did a lot of user training. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you had groups anywhere between 5 up to about 20, 25. Okay, that's right. You spent time in South Africa doing some training, because I did train some of their folks on the user interface. One of the things I did was design the user interface for the ballot counting. And so I had to train them on how to utilize the interface that I designed. The other thing that happened was in Ghana, I had the entire IT staff that I was constantly doing mentoring and training and coming up with lesson plans, basically, processes, etc. So he kind of laid that out for me over coffee one day. And I said, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. And he says, I'm sure that while you were working in the restaurant industry, you trained staff too. And I go, you're right. I trained a lot of wait staff, a lot of a lot of chefs. I trained a lot of folks. And he says, let's take that skill set and transition it to what you're doing now. And it worked. He helped me fill out the application. I put together a resume that was more based on education as opposed to the IT. He helped me practice answering questions in an interview, mm-hmm. right? Because education interview is a little bit different than an IT interview. IT interview, they're asking, so what kind of software do you know? What technologies? What can you do technology-wise? And he was very patient with me, and I did. I got a part-time job here at Diablo Valley College. Next thing you know, it's 6 months later, I've stepped in and taught a couple of classes that they needed emergency help with, and did okay. And came time that 2 full-time positions were opening up in the computer information systems department. And so he said, you got to apply. There's 2 positions. So you have two roll of the dice for this. And I said, okay. Once again, he helped me with everything. And I remember standing at the podium in a back classroom at Los Medanos College, and he was going through a list of questions because he'd done interviews hiring for Los Medanos. Mm-hmm. IT faculty.
Do they use the same questions at Los Medanos?
Every department
is different. Every school is different. Yeah.
But you got to realize it's going to be, so they're going to ask you what kind of software and hardware, and give us examples. They're going to ask you, so you're having a difficulty with a coworker. How do you handle it? And in education, so you have a student who's come to you and has this problem. So they're looking for problem solving. They're very, and I noticed that after a while, he says, you're going to get the same type of questions. They're going to be slightly different at variations. They may ask you to explain how to use Microsoft Word as opposed to Excel, but it's going to be some technology thing. I still remember the first time we did it, I was standing at the podium and I was like staring at the ceiling. He goes, look down, look at me. And he goes, release the podium. You're gonna crunch the arms. And then the other thing is like, stop saying And, that was foreshadowing to me getting married with Jennifer. And because, Jennifer is my wife, and she's a communications major here at the college, or was, because she's retired too. And so who knew that me not saying would one time lead to a new romance. So gracias a Dios, I was able to go through the process. I got hired. And in 1996, I started my full-time tenure track position down at the San Ramon campus of DVC and computer information systems. The second spot went to one of my former instructors, Bill Hammond. He was a seasoned teacher. He had been my teacher. He'd been an adjunct faculty member probably for about 15 years because he had his own business. Mm-hmm. So this was his second career. And so having him as a partner for the first 10 years of my education life was a godsend.
So you really had three careers. You know, there was the restaurant track, then there was the consulting, software and stuff like that. And then now
education.
Yeah, education. So yeah, say folks, you know, it happened more than once.
And then flavors within all that.
Yeah.
You know, and within the restaurant industry, lots of times I was wait staff or back at, you know, kitchen staff, and eventually made myself up to management. Within the IT software world, you know, was just a programmer, then a network designer, then, you know, so a kind of different flavors within that field itself. And then ended up doing the consulting. And then with the teaching, same thing, you know, started off as just an instructor. One of the things I think that both, and I'm sure Jennifer, my wife, will attest to this, is the fact that within the education, yes, you're teaching classes, but then we have such a broad area where we can expand our wings and do some additional things. So, for example, after a time, I ended up working on the curriculum committee here to help develop curriculum. I worked with the Student Learning Outcomes Committee for over 10 years. I was on the technology committee for over 10 years. I was on the distance ed committee for probably close to 20 years, and which helped when we got hit by the pandemic, because we knew people, we had things in place already that helped. Faculty who had not taught distance delivered educational classes, we helped support them and train them to be able to do the big switch. So the 30 years, 29 years at DVC, but 30 years in the district, really, there were so many things I was able to move around in that it really kept the working here fresh. And I think that's why I lasted 30 years within the district, was everything was kind of new.
Well, every year was not the same.
No.
You know, it was like a new thing. And especially in technology. Yeah, because it's like I'm thinking back to the early 90s when, you know, Novell was like the big network thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Novell. That's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I've always said this, you know, Jennifer, God bless her soul, she's had to teach Aristotle's theory of something or other every year for 34 years, because that's what she teaches in comm studies. It's a concept, it's a theory. And I said, I got hired in 1996. I got hired in 96. I was teaching Windows 95 and 96.
Yeah.
Then 1998 arrived and Windows 95 went away. And now I was teaching Windows 98. Then 2000 arrived and I was teaching Millennium Windows.
Yeah.
And so that's been my experience, is that every 3, 4, 5 years, the technology changes, something's new. AI was not even something that was going to be thought of. You know, everything that we've been able to do over the last 30 years in technology has grown from that computer that's sitting inside the display case at the museum.
Yeah.
And so being able to ride that wave has been just phenomenal. For me, my students is the thing that I loved about working here at the college. Having students come back a year or two later and say, hey, Mario, guess what? You know, I got that job at this location and this, that, and the other thing, et cetera, et cetera. One of my favorite stories has always been the fact that I had a student in what is called the Year Up program. The Year Up program was a focused 40-student program that at the end of the 20 weeks, at the end of 20 weeks, I had them for 10. At the end of 20 weeks, they'd go out and they would go do some sort of internship at banks, technology companies like Apple, not Novell,
they're gone.
They're gone. But, you know, so a large
Google,
variety. A large variety. And I had one gentleman who worked for the people that do the goggles, the
VR goggles.
The VR goggle stuff.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name, which company it was specifically. They thought so much of him that they hired him at the end of his 6 months internship.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing. They had a policy that you couldn't be hired unless you had a 4-year degree. He had a 2-year degree. So what they approached him with and said, we're going to hire you, and here's the conditions of the hire. We'd really, 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 really want you to consider this. And he said, okay. And I said, we're going to hire you for 40 hours. 30 of those hours we want you to be working for us. 10 of those hours you're going to go towards your education, and you're going to get your 4-year degree. So they're paying him to go to school, basically, right? And his starting wage was significant. So significant that he went home and he told his mom, she was a single parent, she raised him, there was a little family of just the two of them. She'd been working 2 jobs his entire life. He went home and told his mom, you can quit your night job. I'll take care of you.
Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Isn't that powerful? We give people the tools to make themselves better, but we forget it's not just you who's getting better. It's you and your family. And so I love that story, and having people come back and tell us, we had a great class. Thank you so much for doing. We have been at the Oakland Coliseum back when the A's were at the Oakland Coliseum, and not one, but 2 police officers came up to Jennifer and said, Mrs. Tejada, I had you for speech. The other guy is like, I did too. And we walked away and Jennifer goes, I can't remember what grade they got, but they didn't give us a ticket, so we're good. So.
Well, and you bring up a point, which is one of the things I think, and people lose track of this. There's, especially these days, there's lots of rhetoric floating around about this and that and the other thing. And education is one of the most powerful ways to move yourself up.
Correct.
One of the things here especially at the community college, where we basically take all comers.
Yeah.
And I know we have a ton of programs where, like, I think the first year, the first year experience folks, they get a lot of hand holding and stuff like that to get them over that hump. But we still have a lot of students that are just that one flat tire away from not being able to. And that's one of the things that we're also here at the foundation are trying to help alleviate, is because we would rather see that they get that flat tire fixed and continue on with their education, because then it becomes that thing where they can go home to mom and say, Mom, guess what? You get to retire. I just got a job making 6 figures, or they can now take care of their kid. They can move out of that little teeny apartment and actually get a place with the yard.
If you take a look at my economic situation through my life, coming here and taking the culinary classes allowed me then to move into management within the restaurant industry, which then allowed me to earn a little bit more money than I was just waiting on tables, etc. That opportunity then translated into me being able to come back and get a technical certification. The culinary certificate is a technical. It's vocational.
Yeah.
It's not a history degree or an English degree or philosophy degree. It's to help you get out there and get working. The computer degree was the same way. And so I was able to then use that computer degree to then transition and again, just move up economically just a little bit more. So it just made things just a little bit easier. But then I had success with the restaurant certificate, and I had success with the technology certificate, that I thought to myself, I really need to go back to school and finish those last 2 years. And that allowed me to go out and get a 4-year degree in information management systems, what I teach. I was already hired by the college. I really didn't need to. What it allowed me to do was kind of solidify my theoretical understanding. I had been doing the things. I had been repairing the computers. I had been writing the code. I had been designing the systems. I had been doing consulting. But I needed just a little bit more of that education to solidify my future in that particular industry. And now I had 2 successes, one in the restaurant industry certificate, one in the technology certificate, that I understood education's important. I just need a little bit more. I don't need a PhD. I just need a little bit more so that when I'm dealing with more corporate-based clients, I'm doing maybe some more outside consulting, I have a real good, robust understanding of what's going on. The closest analogy I can think of explaining that difference is you can go out and set up a taco truck, and you may have the best tacos in the world. But if you don't understand fundamental business concepts, how much does it cost me to buy the carne asada meat? How much are the tortillas? How much does it cost me to put together the salsa that everybody loves? If I'm not charging enough and what I'm paying for the ingredients is up here, but what I'm making is down here, even though they're the best tacos ever, we're not going to make it.
Well, if you sell enough of them, you'll make. No.
Yeah.
I actually, there was some business I did some consulting with years and years ago that they were like, we're losing money. It's like you're not charging enough.
Yeah.
Well, we're just looking to increase our volume because we're going to make it up on the volume. No, you'll lose money faster.
Yeah.
So
and that's one of the things. I had a family friend My son went through the culinary program, and one of his friends here has become a very successful chef. He was interested in going out and starting a taco truck. And the interesting thing was we were at a little gathering. His parents were there. We were there. I mean, these are family friends that we've known since grade school. And the dad and I are sitting there talking, and Eric comes over and says, maybe I'll do a taco truck and this, that, and the other thing. Do you have any advice? And I looked at Bill. Bill looked at me. I said, yeah, take the intro to business class, the business administration class. You need to figure out where all that stuff is going.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also my understanding of my path is I've had so many other things bleed into. It's not just restaurant world. It's the restaurant world plus some business application plus some technology application. It's not just technology. It's interpersonal communication. That's why the Year Up program, we incorporated 2 speech classes. Made my wife happy, but it made sense.
Happy wife, happy life.
They needed to take public speaking and they needed to take small group communication because nowadays a lot of tech companies are using small group formats for projects. Now, it may be that you're in the same room. More likely than not, 3 of us are here in the Bay Area. 2 of them are based in Austin, and maybe 2 of them are based in New York City or something. And you still need to be able to do that communication between those 7 people, even though some of them are via Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the entire process. That's why we advocated people, yes, you're learning how to do technology and you're learning how to do project management, but you need these communication skills to be successful.
Well, and I think that the interpersonal skills are something that just got annihilated with COVID. I mean, they were getting chipped away with before that, but then it's like you get COVID where everyone basically is shut up in their house and only interacting through Zoom. And, Zoom is a wonderful piece of technology.
Yes.
It does not replace this.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that, because that's one of the things that we talk about around here is just getting folks over that fear of working with groups and things like that. Okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit. So at some point in there, there was this lovely blonde lady that you met.
Jennifer and I met in 1996 when I started working at the San Ramon campus. We were both in other relationships. Life happens. Things change. And after both of us went through transitions in our previous relationships, we found each other single. So after a period of time, she was single for about a year. I was single for a little bit less than a year. And we'd always been friends. We had always been friends.
So it wasn't the untold,
Yeah, it didn't.
Okay. Just want to be clear, folks.
Yeah, there was no...
Just nothing out of HR is going to have to be... Okay.
There was no daytime drama.
Yeah.
There was no... The Wives of San Ramon. It wasn't nothing like that. And there was nothing there for reality TV. But Jennifer and I had always been friends. Literally when we were with different folks in our life, going across the street to grab a sandwich, she'd throw, $5 at me, bring me back a turkey and avocado. Or like, I need to get out of here. I need to get some fresh air. I need to walk around. And we'd walk over and we'd talk. Her children were a little bit younger than my kids. And so I just did a lot of laughing. When she would complain about, they're not eating anything. All they want is chicken tenders.
Yeah.
Like, just feed them chicken tenders.
Yeah.
Like, so long as they're eating, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Make sure they eat the chicken tenders. Make sure they have some vegetables. What my pediatrician had said, eventually they're going to change their taste buds, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing: as I'm thinking about that, and her response is a mom response. Yours is a dad response.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just like French fries and chicken tenders. They'll figure it out later.
No, not French fries. Some vegetables.
Well, okay. Well, French fries, you could call them kind of vegetables.
If you're Irish.
Yes. Well, and I am. So there we go.
And so is she. So
yeah. See, there we go.
Yeah, so the relationship blossomed, and I was at 3 years down the road. We ended up getting married, and so knock on wood, we've been married going on 23 years this March. Okay, so yeah,
and you taught side by side.
Yeah, we were just reminiscing that back in the day, pre-pandemic, we both had night classes, and it was like Tuesday night. and we were teaching at the San Ramon campus. We're married and everything by that point in time, but we worked out our schedule, so we both had night classes. So we'd commute in for the evening classes together, or depending on the day, we may just have stayed there all day. On the way home, we'd call up the Nations in San Ramon, ask for 2 cheeseburgers and 2 extra hot fries. We'd swing by, after do that weekly. They get to know you. Hey, this is Mario. Can you put my order in? Okay, 2 extra hot fries, right? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Swing by, pop out, grab them, eat 1 bag of fries on the ride home.
Yeah.
Get home, check in with the babysitter, make sure the kids were okay, send them off, and then sit down and have a nice quiet hamburger and reminisce about the day. So yeah, good times, man. Yeah. Good times.
So I know, because we've been friends for a while. So it's one of the things is you did tell a story about when you were debating, talk about that. You were debating whether you were going to retire or not, right? Because you and I we're actually within months of each other. It's the same age. And your wife had to, so talk a little bit, because I thought that was hysterical, because that's like typical. Well, okay, so she was decided she's retiring.
Yes.
And you were like, oh, I'm going to keep working and all this stuff. And she says, so talk about that.
Well, she'd been at this a little bit longer. I mean, she had 34 full-time years, but I think she was part-time about 3 years before that. So probably in the district, 37 years total. And the last 5 years was in management. I mean, I've always said my wife is brilliant. She is just one of the smartest people that I've ever met. She puts you and me to shame. Easy.
I've met her. I agree. So, yes. Yeah. It's like, my one feeling is not going to be hurt by that.
And so she got moved into management. So she was just an academic dean for several years. Then down at the San Ramon, we have a senior dean and an academic dean. So she was academic dean down at San Ramon for years. Our senior dean got moved to Contra Costa College for some other stuff. So they moved her up. They asked her to step into as an interim senior dean for 2 years. And so she did that for 2 years. And then we hired a new senior dean, and she had already said that she was going to retire. So she stepped back and became just an academic dean for another year. At the same time, she was mentoring the new senior dean. So she was training up, but she knew she was out at the end of the year. I kind of waffled a little bit. And to tell you the truth, my waffling is I'm teaching again. I'm back.
Yeah. You love teaching. So it's like, to be fair, it's kind of like, okay, let's put the thing you love the most.
And so in my situation as an instructor, we are required when we retire to basically back off for 6 months. And on December 1st, I hit my 6-month mark. The department needed an emergency fill-in for an Excel teacher, and I said, I'm legal now. I'll do it. So right now I'm teaching a cyber session class. In the spring, I'll teach 2 classes. I'm going to keep it to 2. My 2 favorite. I teach the Apple class. I'm the only one that teaches Apple, and my web design class. Those are my 2. I can teach everything else. I have taught everything else. I do enjoy, and because of the way my retirement is structured, I could actually teach 3 classes. And so what I've decided to do is just teach 2. And then if the department needs an emergency fill-in for something, I can step up. And it still allows us to travel because the classes are distance delivered. So they're 100% online. They're short term. They're only 8 weeks. And it keeps me busy and out of Jennifer's. Don't you have something else to do instead of pestering me?
Why are you standing there?
Why are you standing there? She tells a story of when we took a leave one time for a semester, the both of us. And she says after 2 weeks, she got tired of me saying, so what you doing now? And she goes, leave me alone. So the way that she decompresses and the way that I decompress is 2 different ways. She is a true nester. She will find a hammock. She will find a couch. She will find a blanket. She will grab a book or a magazine and just read and relax and stuff. And I'm good that way for about 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then I go a little stir crazy. So, and it's working out. Like I said, we've been retired for over 6 months. We've done some traveling, and we're planning on doing more traveling. And it's a lot different than I thought. It actually got to the point where I thought maybe I'm going to just stay retired. And then the opportunity to teach came up. And so Was it last night? Yeah, last night I met with two students who were in my Excel class, and they had all sorts of questions, and I got the adrenaline again. I go, no, I think I'm going to keep doing this for a while, and had a great Zoom session with them. Sent them off some information that they were looking for, and they're both aerospace. Their goal is to be aerospace engineers, both of them.
Wow.
And so I'm like, wow, dude, you guys are rocking.
Well, and the thing is, too, is I know I've done 85 of these. I've talked to enough people to where it's like DVC can do it.
Oh yeah.
I know that we've got some professors here that could teach at four-year, very prestigious, universities around here, and they choose to teach here because they find it much more rewarding.
Well, I was a student here, and one of the things that I experienced when I came through my culinary time here, 79 and 80, I took a history class, a California history class with a professor by the name of Jim Rawls. And I came to find out that Jim Rawls had a radio show called Dr. History, and he was hired as a consultant to Disney Corporation to help build the California Adventureland.
Yeah.
And so when they were designing that, they got a hold of him and they paid him as a consultant to help design the California Adventure section of Disneyland down in the LA area. When I got hired in 96, he was still teaching. He was getting ready he was only here for about 3 more years, then he retired. And so I was at a faculty mixer and I said, Professor Rawls, I don't know if you remember me. And we talked a bit. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, that was a while ago. And I said, yeah, 79, 80. And so I asked him the question and I said, why? Because it's Dr. Jim Rawls. He's got a PhD. And so I asked him, I said, why are you here? You could be at Cal. You could be at Stanford. And he says, Cal and Stanford, I would have to do a lot of research. And don't get me wrong, I love research. There was a time in my life where research was really kind of what allowed me to investigate the things that I was interested in the world of history. Here, I have my 5 classes. I get to be in about 200 students' lives. There's about 40 students in each class. And I get to know them. At Cal, I would meet them on the first day. I would come in and give them a pep talk during the midterm, and then I'd see them on the day of the final. All the other times, those classes would be taught by my teaching aides. I don't want that type of life. I want to be able to be in the lives of my students. And to tell you the truth, that kind of is Jennifer's and my philosophy of what are we missing? When we get asked, what do we miss the most about being full-time faculty? Our students, our coworkers, like you guys, people that we get to see on a daily basis, and knowing that we are making a difference, whether it's something significant like the young man who was able to get hired by that VR company, or whether it's people who have slowly come to understand that, they can do education. Last story. I had a student, she was about 58 years old. She had gotten out of an abusive relationship. She was from Peru. This was back in the early 90s. She took Overcoming Computer Anxiety, which was a class we taught back then. Then she took Windows, and then she took Word, then she took Excel, and then the next thing you know, she's taken all our CIS classes. And then at that point in time, Jennifer was the director of a program called PACE, the Program for Adult College Education. And it was designed specifically for working adults. And back then, pre-online, it was, you met one night a week. I think it was Tuesday nights. And you went through a series of classes and you got your GE degree from DVC and your transfer degree. She joined that because now she knew she could do classes. So she ended up taking all the classes and she goes, I really like that psychology class. So she took a couple of additional psychology classes and then decided to apply to UC Berkeley.
Oh.
And got her 4-year degree in psychology from Berkeley at the age of 62. And talk about changing somebody's, come from an abusive relationship to where you've gotten a 4-year degree after you've been told most of your adult life that you have nothing to offer. Oh my God, how powerful is that?
But yeah, and I mean, to be honest, that's one of the things I love about being here. It's just kind of, we're getting into the Christmas time. This will come out on Monday. So it's just like, but it's like, that's where it's like, I get a little kind of melancholy just because it's just like all the students have gone home, we're not going to see anybody for a while. And, I'll get some stuff done, buddy. So, okay. So last question. So, if you had advice to give to your younger self, what would that advice look like?
Well, I think it's probably the same advice that we've come to learn to tell all five of our kids and all 7 of our grandkids, which is don't stop being curious. Don't stop exploring. Yeah, follow what you're interested in and follow what you want to study, etc. Benjamin, my son's a good example. I remember he tried music industries. He tried being a sports medicine guy, a personal trainer, and we said, go to DVC, take 3 GE classes and take 1 class to figure out what you're interested in. And he did. He was so great about that. He'd take the required English and the required math and the required history, but he'd explore all these things. And then I remember, why is it that your kids always surprise you sometimes? And he came kind of hat in hand and he didn't look very happy. And I said, what's going on, mijo? And he goes, Dad, would you be upset if I decided to do culinary? And it's one of those things that you say, oh, kid. I looked at him and I said, why would I be upset? Your grandfather and your grandmother are both chefs. I'm a chef. Your mother is as close to a person that I know that I've worked out here who can bake and cook just almost as good as I can. And, she didn't go through culinary program. No, go for it. See if that's what you enjoy, go for it. You're not letting me down. You're kind of holding up the family tradition. So at this point in time, he's working. He's working in the restaurant industry here and there and doing some other things. But as he's gotten older, he's been interested in real estate. So he's doing the culinary thing to help drive a new interest. Mm-hmm. And that's where the curiosity comes from. I think you and I have had such a varied life in our work history that the curiosity that allows me to investigate something else down the road, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you said earlier, people feel that you got to be locked into one thing forever. No, not really.
Well, I love that piece of advice. I also like, was it Mike Rowe? He thought the worst advice he ever gives somebody is, it's like, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. He says, that's terrible advice. He says, fall in love with what you do. And he learned that on the show Dirty Jobs, because people were doing some of the most disgustingly horrific jobs and loved it.
Yeah.
And that was the lesson he took away from that I've always thought about that too. Because that's how you end up doing all the things, it's like because you want the restaurant and then eventually computers, all that looks like fun. And you fall in love with all these bits and pieces of it. And then all of a sudden you're teaching.
And to tell you the truth, I didn't step away from the restaurant business. People ask me, why didn't you inherit your parents' restaurant? That type of commitment, God bless my mom and dad. They were in that restaurant 24/7. Mm-hmm. The only days they had off was Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving. Christmas Eve, Thanksgiving, Christmas Day. So that's the only days they closed. They were open on New Year's Eve. They were open on New Year's Day. They were there 24/7. I couldn't make that commitment. They could. I couldn't. But I still love the industry. I still do. I still get a little mood.
I know. I've had your pastor, man. It's like, yeah.
And so for me, when I went back to that 4 years to finish my 4-year degree, I incurred some student debt. But I had a plan. And my plan was I was going to go back and work at the restaurant. I went and worked at the family restaurant Friday nights. The condition for me working was, Dad, you take Mom out to dinner. And Dad being Dad, he says, what happens if we want Mexican food? And I said, Well, if you want Mexican food, you can take it to go or try our competitors and see if we need to be worried about the competitors down the road. And he goes, "Oh, you're mean." And I said, "No, I'm not mean. I just want you guys to relax. And if I'm here, you don't need to be here. Because if they'd be there, they'd be bussing tables, they'd be jumping into the kitchen, and that was all stuff I could do. It helped me out. I got my little touch of restaurant life once a week. It helped pay off my student debt because that paycheck and those tips all went to pay off my student debt. It allowed me to see some old returning customers. I got out of my wife's hair Friday night.
Yeah, I'm sure she was grateful for that too. So, well, thank you very much for coming in, Mario. I appreciate it. We gotta get Jennifer in here, and then I'm gonna get both of you in here for February.
I just want to say, don't believe anything she says. Just preempting that about me.
The rest of it is all true.
The rest of it is all true.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next, the podcast for the DVC Alumni Association. You can contact us at alumni@dvc.edu with any comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to our podcast.